All right, so here we go. Let's talk about some well-developed, round, boulder, jacked shoulders. All right, so we're going to talk about, how to, rather, my favorite exercises for developing some nice shoulders. Now, I alluded to it before, earlier in the episode, when I said, please note I say my favorite. I don't say the best, right? I don't, it's the internet is flooded with the best of this, the best of that, for this, for that. And my idea is, and there are a lot of other people, that this is not like a brand new idea or anything like that. And I'm not trying to pose it as such. But the main idea here is, I'm just going to tell you my favorites. I'm going to tell you my favorites, and I'm going to tell you why they're my favorites, my favorite exercises to do, and my favorite exercises to coach, right? Because to come up with something to say that it's the best, I mean, the best is context dependent. In other words, I'm not going to give you the best exercises to develop your shoulders because the thing is, I don't know you. I don't know how you move. I don't know if you had any injuries previous to anything. I don't know exactly what you're able to do, what you're not able to do. I don't know if you have shoulders at all. You might not even have shoulders, right? So these are the things I don't know. I don't have context, so I can't tell you the best shoulder exercises. I can tell you my favorites, though, and that's what I plan to do, right? So the second part here is I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. I have a particular rating system for every exercise, okay? So I rate each exercise based on four metrics, right? The opportunity for strength, the opportunity for hypertrophy, the recovery process, and the difficulty of doing the exercise. And it's a 1 to 10 scale for each section, okay? So a 10 on the strength scale would mean it is great for strength gains, right? A 10 on the hypertrophy scale means you're going to add some lean muscle tissue, right? A 10 on the recovery scale means it's the easiest to recover from. And a 10 on a difficulty scale basically says this is not that difficult to do. So it's not like an Olympic lift, right? which tends to lean towards being more difficult, right? So how do your shoulders how are they formed? What are they? What are your delts, your deltoids? What are they, right? And what do they do, and how are they made up? So your shoulder, your deltoids is made up of 3 sections. Well, really, it's 7 sections, but the main 3 sections that everybody talks about, that we know the most, that's most common knowledge, right, is you have your front delt, your mid delt, and your rear delt. But in actuality, they break out into 7 smaller sections, where your mid delt is actually one small sliver of muscle. And then you have 3 individual sections connecting at the clavicle on the front for your front delt. And then you have 3 more sections on the back connecting at the acromion, right? So, and they all kind of bring down into the humerus and, to your arm bone, right? I don't know how to put that in layman's terms, but they all connect, and they basically move together to move your arm kind of away from your body. That's what they're responsible for, moving your arm away from your body in a number of different degrees, going around your body all the way to the back here, right? So that's the anatomy of it. That's kind of a brief, very, very brief anatomy, and a very brief physiology in the way it moves, right? So now you understand, right? Again, these are my favorite exercises. I have a particular rating system, and you know how the shoulder moves a little bit. So now, what are these exercises? So the first exercise, that's ultimately my favorite, and it's probably a no-brainer for a lot of people, is lateral raises. The lateral raise in 3 variations in particular, but I kind of just group them up into the lateral raise exercise, right? So overall, I give the lateral raise a 5, kind of like mid-range on the strength scale, and 8 on the hypertrophy scale, because it's really good to kind of add them up. The reason why I gave it a 5 on the strength scale, though, is because it's really hard to get that muscle so much stronger because it works with other ones. So it's like you're going to be doing a lot of compound lifts in order for, to get strengthened. And a lot of times those compound muscles end up taking over anyway for your shoulders. So it's kind of hard to strengthen up your shoulders in a traditional sense. I mean, you could do it for sure and make sure you have strong shoulders and strong rotator cuffs and all that fun stuff. But I don't match it up with the traditional ways of like strength training, basically. So I just gave it a 5. I gave it middle of the road, and lateral raises, middle of the road for strength, but great for hypertrophy, right? And that's why I gave it an 8. Recovery, depending on which version you do, I gave that another middle of the road 5. And in terms of difficulty to do, that's another middle of the road 5. So basically 5, 8, 5, 5. Right. And now why do I say it's a 5 in the difficulty scale? Well, it's not like just based on the variations. It's not super difficult to do, even though a lot of people jack it up. And you want to keep in mind when you're doing lateral raises, it's almost like you want to make sure that you're not hiking your shoulders up, but you're kind of depressing down. So you're almost activating your lats a little bit to keep your shoulders pressed down. And then from that point, you're just pushing out, pushing your arms out. So it's as if you're standing in like a doorway or something like that, and you're trying to reach the sides of the doorway by pushing out and without leaning one way or the other, right? A lot of problems that people tend to run into is they're trying to do full range lateral raises with too much weight. And they end up doing some weird bicep exercise, some weird back exercise, and it typically doesn't work out. But there is a place for heavy lateral partials. So part of the responsibility of your shoulder in general is to stabilize that joint, mind you. So the more pressure you can put on your shoulder in terms of stabilization, the stronger it tends to get. So heavy lateral partials tend to work out pretty well in terms of keeping your, in terms of like strength, in terms of hypertrophy. It seems to work out pretty well there. So that's a variation that you could do. And please keep in mind, I'm going to have videos for all of these exercises that I'm mentioning and exactly how to do them. And it's like kind of like little tutorials, okay? So, just hang with me a little bit as I explain each of these exercises. All right, so my next favorite exercise to do for shoulders, for well-developed shoulders, is an exercise called monkey rows. And it's a weird exercise, but basically it's like an upright row, but you're not overhand. You have a neutral grip and your hands are at your sides. You could basically do these with dumbbells, or you can do them with a trap bar, right? So basically your arms are going to be at your sides and you're going to stand upright and then you're going to pull and basically row upright. So it's not a great range of motion, but you're able to add a little bit of weight here and basically tag the middle delt. It actually tags the whole shoulder, depending on your elbow angle, but you want to make sure that your elbows are kind of out at the side. So it's like this, right? And the dumbbells or the trap bar basically just going up and down your sides like this, right? Now, inevitably for this one, as you go up a little bit more in the weight, you're going to bring in other muscles, primarily your traps, but it's still one of my favorites. I actually do it on a day where I'm trying to develop my traps and work my traps as well. I just really like them, and they feel pretty decent. And I wouldn't worry too much about being able to have your like elbows all the way out here. That's kind of a weird feeling. Like even if they're slightly turned back a little bit, the whole point though is make sure you have proud chest. So you're upright and your hands are staying at your sides, and you're just up here, up here, up here. Okay. That exercise is typically it's pretty good. So I guess the ratings that I gave it was 5, 7, 4, 3, and I had to just double check that one because so it was 5, middle of the road in terms of strength, but I think I kind of want to change that. I think that's probably more like a 6 or a 7 on the strength gains because it's kind of a compound exercise, especially if you start to bring in your traps a little bit more. So I think I'm changing that to a 6, right? So instead it'll be 6, 7 on a hypertrophy scale because it's more of a compound exercise. You're bringing more muscles in, tends to lead to more muscle growth. And then a 4 for the recovery scale. Again, the closer you get to a compound exercise, the longer it's going to take you to recover. So the lower on a recovery scale it's going to be. So here it's more like a 4. And then 3 for difficulty, because it's a lot of people, first of all, can't do upright rows, and a lot of people shouldn't do upright rows. So it's a little bit more of a difficult exercise. Plus, not that many people know about it. But it's actually, I think it's an old school exercise. But it's one of those things where, like, if you over torque your elbows and you bring them forward like this, then you have a problem. Or if you just don't bring them forward enough and you're hanging back here, you're turning it into some other exercise that actually is on the list too. But you want to make sure, like, the difficulty comes in at make sure that your elbows are at the right angle there. So that's that becomes a 3 on the difficulty scale, okay? And the next exercise is amongst my favorite exercises, period. Like, of all exercises. I wish I could do these things almost every day. And it's a variation of, like, kind of like a monkey row, but it's not. So basically what it does is it works your rear delt. And I really just call these, like, trap bar bent over rows, but just focused on the shoulder. So when you typically do a row or a bent over row, like, you're actually hinging and going deep into it. Here, you're just going to slightly lean in a little bit, and you're going to grab the trap bar, neutral grip, and what you're going to do is that you're actually going to pull your elbows back and up. And by doing that, you're working the rear delt like this here, and I don't know if you can see it on the boom right here. So you're working your rear delt. So typically you work your rear delt 2 ways. This way, going along this plane, or this way. And a lot of people find that they can work their rear delt better this way than going this way. So for the trap bar rows that are a little bit more upright, you're going to have neutral grip, slight lean in, and you're basically going to angle it so that, or angle yourself so that your rear delt is doing the lifting. And that is one of the few exercises I think I felt my rear delts on, because most exercises I don't feel my rear delts. And so practicing that exercise again and again really helped me feel my rear delts even when I'm doing flies now. So it's a good one. At the scale, the rating I have for that one is it's 6.948. So 6 on the strength scale, because again, it's kind of a compound lift and you're bringing in some of your traps, but now middle trap, right? A 9 on the hypertrophy scale, because this exercise is literally what I use to blow up my rear delts. So it's my favorite. But it's a really good one, again, because it's a compound lift type thing, or it could be a compound lift. You can add a little bit more weight and really just drive in that motion here. Boom, you're here. And then it ends up being a 4 on a recovery scale. Again, compound lifts tend to take longer to recover from. And that's really it, right? And then an 8 on the difficulty scale. It's not that hard to do. In fact, there's more when people are trying to, and this is what I noticed, when people are trying to do bent over rows, they end up actually doing this type of shoulder row because they're not bent over enough and they're not in it enough, and or their back ends up rolling too much, so they have to kind of stand up a little bit taller, right? So they don't necessarily have the glute strength and the lower back strength to be able to keep that position. So I found that a lot of people end up just doing rear delt rows. But it's one of my favorite exercises. Now, the next exercise, my next favorite exercise, actually works the front delt, right? The front delt. front delt. You have multiple front delts. No, the front delt. And it's a lying down on a bench cable front raise, right? So you're basically going to lie down on the bench. You're going to set the cable up at like maybe medium height. So if you're standing up and you're at the cable stack, you want to set it up to basically belly button height, right? Then you want to grab a bench, move it up there, lay the bench completely flat, and you want to lie on a bench with the cable stack, right? And so now you want to grab a bar handle, basically, so that your hands could be like this, your overhand, and you want to lie down and you want to do a front raise. So it's going to basically, let me move this out of the way real quick, right? So then you want to do a front raise. So you're here while lying down, and you're going to bring it up, and then back down. One of my favorite exercises. It really tags the front delt, and it also tags a little bit of your traps too. But it eliminates this body English we tend to put on for a front raise, right? So if we were doing traditional front raises with dumbbells, we would kind of tend to swing into it a little bit, right? With the bench, lying down on a bench on the bar and the cable there, that pretty much eliminates that, and it forces you to really tag your front delt even more. Now, the rating I gave this one was 5.768. So it's 5 on the strength scale, and it might even be a little bit less than that. It's probably more like a 4, because you can't necessarily stack up the weight on this one, right? So, so the 7 on the hypertrophy scale, because you are directly targeting this muscle. So you'll target this somewhere around the upper pec, but then somewhere around the trap as well. So it targets that area really, really well. Okay. A 6 on the recovery scale. For some reason, and maybe this is just me, but myself and a couple other people that I've coached doing this, they've become really, really sore doing this exercise in particular. So the recovery isn't as good as you would think. But it wasn't like debilitating soreness. It's just, wow, I didn't think so. Maybe it'll take a few more times of doing it, but I noticed that this one tends to make people a little bit more sore than just the regular exercise, right? Just regular front raises. And then finally, it's an 8 on the difficulty scale. It ain't that hard to do. In fact, you can actually lock yourself in place, keeping your feet on the ground and actually tightening up your glutes while laying there, so that you're not going all over the place. It's particularly a very easy exercise to pull off here. Okay. Now the next exercise is a really, really good one. We're working on these rear delts again, and it's a suspension T-raise. Okay. So if you have a suspension trainer hooked up anywhere, basically what you want to do is you want to kind of hang from it. And move this away so hopefully you can still hear me, but hang from it, right? And then you're just going to bring your arms out. So you're basically doing a fly with the suspension trainer, okay? Now, that one you will feel your rear delts on very, very easily. And you can adjust the pressure that you're putting on your rear delts by the angle that you're standing initially, right, at the beginning of the exercise. And this one I have rating of 4, 5, 8, 10. Okay, so 4 on the strength scale because you're not really loading up the weight for this one, right? And that's probably more like a 3. It seems like I'm adjusting all my ratings on a fly, but 4 on the strength scale is not really known for strength. A 5. And that probably should be more like a 6 on a hypertrophy scale, because you could really, like, if you could get, let's just say you do 4 sets of 20 of those things, oh man, you're going to get a nasty pump. So I think it might be a little bit worse on the strength scale, a little bit better on the hypertrophy scale. An 8 on the difficulty scale, recovery scale. 8 on a recovery scale because it isn't going to be too much for you to recover from. I don't think I've ever gotten sore from these things. I don't think anybody's gotten sore from these things. And you don't really feel, extreme fatigue doing suspension T raises, right? Now it's a 10 on the difficulty scale because it's easy to do. You sit there, you hang there, and then you open up. The only thing that you have to worry about, the only thing really, is to make sure that you're not doing like your elbow angle isn't too low. So for example, if you're watching on the video, my elbows are basically at 45-degree angles here, right? You don't want to do a raise from there. You want to actually raise them up so that you're actually forming a T, right? And then bring out from there. The only other thing that people tend to do is they tend to bend their arms as they're doing it. So it's just like you're also doing some weird form of tricep exercises in the middle of it. But other than that, it's not a very hard exercise to do at all. All right, so the last exercise on my favorites list, at least for right now, my favorite list or my favorite exercises to blow up your shoulders list. Yeah, try saying that 5 times fast. But my last favorite exercise is something I called, and I'm not even sure what people have named this before, but I named them Cerberus raises. Okay, and then I was like, well, what are those? So basically, it's a landmine exercise that I've done for a long time, right? And you basically want to set up the landmine. If you don't know what a landmine is, basically it's a little apparatus that you put in between inside the two, like a couple plates, and you have the plates in the middle of a floor, so it looks like a landmine. And then you stick the barbell into the little apparatus so that the barbell can move all around the plates, and you can like lift it, raise it, and you can do a whole bunch of different exercises with it, right? So what I typically like to do with the landmine are these Cerberus raises, and it's like a lateral raise, but it's also like a front raise, and it's also like an exercise that I've seen before called sword pulls, where you're basically pulling and raising the arm up and around like this, but you're starting on this angle right here, so your arm is here, and you're pulling up like that, right? So it's very similar to like sword pulls, but here you're taking the end of the barbell, and it's going to kind of go across like you're kind of almost hitting close to your midsection here, right? But your arm is going to be here. You're going to be at your opposite. So you're going to take, let's just say I'm taking my right arm. I'm going to have my hand at my left pocket, right? So it's going to be across my body a little bit. And I'm going to, while holding onto this barbell, raise all the way up at an angle. So I'm going up and across at an angle. Those things are so good, but there's a little catch to them, right? So here's the rating. The rating I have for those 5.5, 7.2, okay? So 5 on the strength scale because you're not going to load up the weight for this because it actually puts your shoulder in a kind of a weird spot. So you have to have some pretty tough shoulders already, right? So I definitely don't put this in for every coaching program. Not at all, right? So it's a 5 on the strength scale, 5 on a hypertrophy scale, but a 7 on a recovery scale because you're basically using all of your shoulder at different points, and you're kind of stretching or going to the limits of your shoulder mobility here, right? And it is a 2 on the difficulty scale. It's a pretty difficult exercise to do. Now, of that rating, why is this one of my favorites? Because, well, you know, it really comes down to kind of like it's one of those challenging exercises, right? And I actually had to build my shoulders up enough in terms of mobility and in terms of strength to be able to attempt these safely, right? So it almost is like a mental challenge for me to do Cerberus raises. I like them though now that I'm able to do them. There was only a few people that I've coached that have been actually able to do them because, you know, everybody's shoulders made differently, right? So some people, they have their range of motion kind of ends at a certain point over here, and then it just doesn't really kind of work out right when they're trying to lift it. It's semi above their head and all that fun stuff. So it doesn't always work out. But I love the exercise because I always get a great pump out of them, right? But you can't load up the weight, and it is very, very difficult to do because you're working with the size of or the weight of the barbell. Now, if you're working with Olympic barbells and it's 45 pounds, that's a lot of weight to lift for something that's going across your body and you're just using your shoulders to bring it back around. So it doesn't score very highly on the difficulty rating there, but it's still a pretty decent exercise to work to build up to, at least, right?